Okay, everybody, let's get started. I hope today that I can conclude this section on discussing the vertebrates, and we're going to finish up with discussing the evolution of our own group, which are the mammals. And unfortunately, as I've said before, I've just got to skim through this. It's actually a complex topic, but we're not studying zoology in full. So we're just really going to do like a survey of the main ideas in this story. So this is where we've ended up. We've been talking about this giant clade called the amniotes, and they are all characterized by producing some variation of the amniotic egg. And we talked a bit about the reptiles, the birds, that whole group. But now we're going to talk about our own group, our own clade, which are the synapsids. So the amniotes divided predominantly into these two groups, the true reptiles that we've discussed before, and then this other group, the synapsids. And out of that synapsid group developed the whole mammal line to which we belong. And we know of about 6,500 species of mammal. So it's a diverse group. And of course, on both land and in marine systems, they are often extremely important and very significant members of the ecology of these areas. So here, when we talk about the mammals, there's a group of characteristics which we regard as being derived characters, which define the mammalian group. And the first is that mammals have mammary glands. That's in fact where they get the name from. And the mammary glands are, in fact, highly modified sebaceous glands. Those are the glands in the skin which produce fats and oils. And the mammary glands are very highly specialized, highly evolved sebaceous glands which produce this nutrient substance, milk. And that is characteristic of the mammals. The second thing is, I'm actually going to kind of lump these three characteristics together. One of the things which has become characteristic of the mammals, although it is not unique to them, is that they have a very high metabolic rate and they are endothermic. That is, they maintain a constant body temperature. And the whole metabolism is designed to keep that body temperature constant. This is a huge advantage. Just imagine, for example, if we were all true reptiles and we did not have an endothermic system. In this cold weather, we would all be tucked up somewhere and not moving, because our body temperatures would be the same as our environment. Instead, the mammals have a very high metabolic rate, and they control the metabolism so that a constant body temperature is maintained. This in addition, has this huge advantage. This it maintains homeostasis for all of our metabolic systems, which are all operate for us at about 37 degrees Celsius. It's optimal at about 37 degrees Celsius. So in order to assist in that, in maintenance of a constant body temperature, mammals have also developed some other characteristics, and these are hair and a distinct fat layer underneath the skin, which is lacking in the other group of amniotes, that the birds and the reptiles. There is also modification of respiratory and the circulatory systems. Mammals have a entirely closed circulatory system, of course, as all of the vertebrates do. But we have a very efficient four-chambered system, which is lacking in other vertebrate groups. We also have it, surprisingly enough, don't sort of think about this often, and that is we have a diaphragm, which reptiles do not have. The diaphragm allows a very efficient respiration for all that our respiratory system, as I've mentioned before, is not as efficient as that of the birds. But nonetheless, the mammals, the whole synapsid line that we're going to talk about, developed a diaphragm, which isolates the lungs from the abdomen, and it allows the lungs to operate efficiently. Another tendency in the mammals is to have a large brain to body size ratio. And it's really important to think that brain size must be related to the body size. For example, a blue whale has an enormous brain, much larger than ours. But the mere size of the brain on its own is not that important unless you consider it in relationship to the size of the body. And when we compare brain to body size as a ratio, we find that in this whole line, the mammals, it tends to be rather large. The next thing is varies somewhat, but there is a tendency within the mammals as well to have extensive parental care. And very often, if you want to think about it, training of young, they gain by experience in being in contact with the parents. Then there are a whole lot of anatomical features about the characteristics of the mammals. I'm not going to talk about them all, but the one which we're going to follow, which is tremendously important in tracing the evolution of the mammals, is that our teeth are differentiated. We have different teeth that have different purposes in our jaw. The reptiles do not have that. Their teeth tend to all be much the same as one another. And in addition, their teeth in the reptiles are continually replaced. They continually produce teeth which can be easily lost and easily replaced. The tendency in the mammals is to move towards highly differentiated teeth, and we end up just with two sets of teeth, a juvenile set and then an adult set. And we do not grow. We cannot replace teeth. Like the adult teeth, we have one, if we lose one, that we can't replace it. That's not the case in the reptiles. Reptiles can replace their teeth the whole time throughout their lives. Okay, so these are sorts of things that we're going to be watching for in the mammals, these derived characters. But we need to realize that we are actually members of a clade which has very ancient roots. And this is the synapsid line. That word synapsid comes from a feature of the skull. And that is that the synapsid, here this is a very early synapsid, looks very reptilian. This here is a diapsid skull. This is the clade which led to all of the reptiles and everything. Now, just all that we need for the moment to look at. This is the diapsid skull. Can you see it has two openings in the skull? The synapsids have only one. They have one opening. And remembering that we are synapsids, okay, just think of a human skull. It might be difficult to picture, but it's easy to picture if you put your fingers below your eye and you feel that arch that runs around there arises because of this hole in the skull, the single hole. The fact that we only have one leads to this name, synapsid. And the synapsids of this ancient group, when we first see them when we see them in the fossil record, the early ones look extremely reptilian. They didn't have hair. When you looked at their gait, they had their their upper arms out at right angles to the body, with the forearms at right angles to that, suspending the body in that primitive, lumbering, reptilian kind of style. They laid eggs and were very, very, really, in many ways, looked very, very reptilian. Even in the early ones, though, there is some sign when we begin to look at the structure of the teeth, and when we'll discuss this in a little bit more detail in a minute. There's some of the structures at the back of the skull here. We see that they are in a different line to the diapsids entirely. And they proceeded along their own line of evolution. In this very early group, however, I must emphasize, we need to resist the temptation to think that this synapsid led to this synapsid led to this synapsid in a straight line to the mammals. In actual fact, early on, they were very, very diverse. And the ancestors of the very successful synapsids and the ancestors of the mammals, those are shared early on. And we see the mammals arising out of that early diversity, along with, for a time, along with all sorts of other synapsids. I hope that that's clear. I just want always to emphasize, when we talk about evolution of these groups, we need to resist the temptation to think that it's a straight line to some end. It's not. The ancestors of these groups often are together. They exist together, and the different lines diverge out from those early ancestors. Nonetheless, when we look at these early synapsids, here are a whole lot. I think I've shown you this diagram before, but this is for us quite interesting because these are synapsids which are found in the fossil record of North America. And these synapsids are found, the synapsid fauna is found predominantly North America, South Africa, and Russia. It was a feature of the early structure of the continents, the Pangean structure. And there was continents lay in a climate belt which was suitable for the synapsids. These synapsids, we believe, already had a tendency of moving towards endothermy. And the very large ones actually had problems controlling body temperature because their mass was so big. And this is why in some of the very large ones, this is the famous Dimetrodon, which you've probably seen if you've been to the Museum of Natural History. This is one of these spectacular synapsids with these huge crests on the top. These were thermoregulatory. These large ones tended to overheat. And this was a way of losing heat to the environment. You'll see that they vary enormously. This is a very diverse group. And somewhere in here lie the ancestors of the mammals. So these groups coexisted with one another. They varied. Some of them were carnivorous, others were herbivorous. The Dimetrodon, if you look at the skull, you can see already it's got these big canines. Dimetrodon was carnivore. It has teeth which are designed for stabbing. It has teeth at the back which are designed for cutting and shearing, and teeth which are designed for grinding as well. The herbivorous ones, their teeth tended to be much the same, and designed for pulling material, vegetation, and then grinding it. We see real differentiation in these carnivores like Dimetrodon. So those are the earliest synapsids. One of the interesting things to follow in the evolution of these synapsid groups, as we start to see the mammals emerging in the fossil record, is to have a look at changes in the structure of the jaw. In the early synapsid, it looks very, very reptilian. in that there are several bones that make up the lower jaw, where we only have the mandible. We only have the one jaw, one bone. Here they have a number of bones. If we look at a very early synapses, in fact, if we look at a reptile, this is much like what we see. Have this kind of sitting in between here. This is actually the bone of the inner ear that they're just showing blown up. In the reptiles and the early synapses, there's just one little bone in the inner ear, and that is the stapes.
Wait, so Professor.
Yes, go ahead.
So in these dinosaurs back in the day, they had a bone in their ear.
Yes.
And what was it called?
The stapes.
Oh, it's right here. Okay, thank you.
Yep. All right. So that is typical for the diapsids and for these early synapsids as well. They just had this one little bone in the inner ear, and they had these bones making up the jaw here. And the ones that we want to keep an eye on are actually this bone here and this bone here, which is called the quadrate. There it is there. This is a little purple bone there. And this bone here, which is called the articular. And as we follow the synapsid evolution, as we get to the advanced synapses and then to the mammals, we see that these bones actually become incorporated into the inner ear. And here they are here. This is now, this, which was the articular, now forms this, which is called the malleus. And this here, the quadrate, that purple there, forms this, which is called the incus. Here is the stapes, which was there all the way through. This is exactly what we have. This is typical of the mammalian ear, but it's also typical of the late synapsids, of this late synapsid group, not yet truly mammal. But here it is, here's one here. This is an advanced synapsid. And just look at it. There's not a lot now to distinguish the skull from a mammalian skull. They have very, very differentiated teeth. They have there's these 3 bones of the inner ear. They have reduced the number of bones. Here they still, even in the advanced synapses, they have this little tiny bone here. It's called the angula, which is lost entirely in the mammals. But you can see that this advanced synapsid looks very, very mammalian. Now okay, this just is mainly to show you the placement of these bones. Here's the reptilian. This is exactly like a modern day reptile. Here are the stapes here. Here's the inner ear. Here's the eardrum. And remember, this ability to hear sound through the air is a modification of being up on land. Here in the mammals, present day mammals, this is exactly what we have. Here's the eardrum, 3 little bones derived originally from the jaw, and here's the inner ear here, communicating via the stapes. Okay, so here are some of the more advanced synapsids, and one of the features of the more advanced synapses also was that they began to lose that old reptilian stance. Instead, the limbs begin now to move directly underneath the body. They still have a sort of a mammalish, reptilian kind of look to them. There's one thing I want to pull you up on though, and that is these are not dinosaurs. Remember that the dinosaurs are a diapsid group. They coexisted. There were many diapsid groups, but until the end of the Triassic, these synapsids were the dominant group. They were enormously successful. And all of the diapsids were actually kind of obscure. They were there. The dinosaurs had not yet evolved. The ancestors of the dinosaurs certainly had. But this was the dominant group right until the end of the Permian and then until the end of the Triassic. So it's out of this group that we're going to follow a particular line which began to develop characteristics which we now regard as being mammalian. It's not easy to see always from the fossil record, because you'll realize that there are certain traits which are not going to be represented easily in the fossil record. For example, hair is not well fossilized, and the ability to produce milk, that's not something which we're going to see in the fossil record. But nonetheless, we believe that within this very diverse group of synapsids, the evolutionary potential for these things was certainly present. So just to summarize what the tendencies that we see within, as we follow the synapsids through time and through the fossil record, what we see is that especially evolution and simplification of the jaw. We see increasing differentiation of teeth. This move, by the time we get to the late synapsids, we see that they have two sets of teeth, and the teeth are fully rooted. Reptilian teeth are not. Reptilian teeth are kind of cone-shaped, and they don't have a proper root. And that is a reflection of the fact they are easily lost and often replaced. But in the synapsids, we see that there are two sets of teeth, a juvenile and an adult set. Along with this evolution of the jaw, we see the evolution of the inner ear, an increased upright, efficient locomotory stance. And along with that, we believe that endothermy and the ability to maintain constant body temperature was an early development in the synapsids. We believe that many of the synapsids that we see in the fossil record were in fact endothermic. Along with that endothermy came developments like the diaphragm and ultimately hair, which is characteristic of the mammals and was probably characteristic of the late synapsids, the advanced synapsids. So they arose, this group arose very early on, about 300 million years ago is an easy figure to try and remember. That was during the Permian. You'll remember something about the Permian though, and that is that at the end of the Permian, when the synapsid groups were really, really dominant and very, very diverse, at the end of the Permian, there was a catastrophic mass extinction. We do not understand exactly why. There are various theories about why that extinction occurred, but a huge proportion of living organisms on the planet, something like 70%, were rendered extinct. And many of these synapsid groups were amongst them. So they persisted, however, into the Triassic. And the Triassic, which ended about 200 million years ago, by the end of the Triassic, they had almost disappeared, excepting for these lines of very advanced synapsids, which looked very, very mammalian indeed. However, by this time, that other group had arisen, and these were all of those diapsids, those incredibly successful diapsids like the dinosaurs and the pterosaurs. All of those had, by this time, by the Triassic, they were becoming dominant. And you can picture it as all of those diapsid groups, they were very diverse. And that diversity meant that they occupied ecological niches that excluded other organisms. Only in any particular ecological niche, any particular part of the ecology with its own characteristics. If something occupies that ecological niche, they tend to exclude they exclude competition, they exclude competitors from their ecological niche. The dinosaurs, the other diapsids, were very, very diverse, very, very successful. And these remaining lines of synapsids, although they were there and they did survive, they were unable to be successful. The really successful synapsid had already been wiped out. So by the end of the Triassic, then the only synapsids we see are these advanced synapsids. You will see them referred to, and I still call them mammal-like reptiles, but the true term for them is proto-mammals or mammal-like synapsids, because they have many, many mammal-like characteristics that we can see, but they also still had characteristics which would made them look, in some cases, rather reptilian. And then the first true mammals arose during the Jurassic. Now, you'll recall that this Triassic, Jurassic, this is the time when the dinosaurs were enormously successful. The poor mammals, they just scurried around, barely making a living in the face of the success of the dinosaurs. But nonetheless, we see our first true mammals about 200 million years ago or so, the end of the Triassic, beginning of the Jurassic. Okay, this is just a summary. And I just put this in just to remind you of the timing. Okay, we will say most of the synapsids died out at the end of the Permian, but there were groups which did survive, and they survived into the Mesozoic era. And the Mesozoic is divided into the Triassic, ending about 200 million years ago, the Jurassic, and the Cretaceous. By the end of the Triassic, there was really the synapsids, by and large, had died out, except for these very advanced ones called the proto-mammals. And if we look at them, this is what they begin to look like. These are even advanced proto-mammals. They're not truly mammalian yet. There are some characteristics, especially anatomically, that isolate them from the true mammals. But they're in a line of synapsids called the mammaliaforms. And have a look at them, and you'll immediately realize they've got a look to them, which is different. This is no longer the reptilian look. This is something else. One of the things that gives it away is, in fact, the stance. They have brought the limbs underneath the body. They probably had hair. Their teeth were very, very distinctly differentiated. They had ears, and something we believe is characteristic of most mammals, they have an external ear to improve the hearing and allow directionality as well. If the reptiles, if they want to hear direction, they have to turn the whole head. Mammals do not. They can flap an external ear. If we can too, by the way, you train your muscles, you can flap your ears. We've still got the musculature residual, but it's still there from the ability to turn the ear and hear directionally. The mammals also tend to have eyes which come to the front of the head, and the eyes come close together. That is because that affords them binocular vision. this is going to become very important in our group of mammals, which are the primates. They have hair. We don't know what the status of milk production was, but it is very possible that there was some sort of primitive milk production, which I'll talk about in a minute. Okay, so here's just a crude phylogeny for you about what we're going to talk about. All of these here are the earlier synapsids. That's what you can think of there. These are later synapsids here. And especially these, when we talk about anything around here, these are synapsids with advanced mammal-like characteristics. But in that group, there is an ancestor, a single ancestor to the true mammals. And these are the mammalia. That is our group, the mammalia. And here it is here. Probably its origins at the end of the Triassic, somewhere around there. And we recognize nowadays 3 groups of mammals, which have very, very distinct characteristics from one another. And these are the monotremes there. The Metatheria, that's the proper name, but you will know the name, the marsupials. And then our group, which are the Eutheria. And the Eutheria are the most successful and the most dominant of the mammals. And in fact, if you want to think about it, our own species in many ways must be regarded as being one of the most successful species that the planet has ever seen. And its success comes at a price, because our success as a single species has radically modified the planet itself, which is something that very few other species have ever done. So here are the 3 groups of living mammals: the monotremes, the marsupials or Metatheria, and then our group, the Eutheria. The Eutheria, it is useful to remember their other name, which is the placentals, the placental mammals. These are the mammals that produce a true placenta, and I'll show you the distinctions in a minute. Okay, so you can picture it like this. All the way till the end of the Cretaceous. At the end of the Cretaceous is marked by that cataclysmic mass extinction that wiped out all of the dinosaurs except for the small dinosaur line that led to the birds. When that happened, though all the ecological niches which the dinosaurs had occupied were suddenly liberated, when the Earth returned to a functional state again after this cataclysm, which we believe was due to an asteroid, there were many, many empty ecological niches. And over the next few million years, the mammal group supplanted the diapsids and occupied those ecological niches. And the mammal group then became the dominant and most successful of the vertebrate groups. And so we can date that the success of the real success of the mammals to about 65 million years ago, but its roots lie earlier. Its roots lie in the Jurassic, which was 160 million years ago. The mammals are enormously diverse. When we think about it, we have flying mammals like the bats, even the flying squirrels, things like that. We have many, many terrestrial mammals in all sorts of different habitats that they occupy. We have mammals on every continent except for Antarctica. We have terrestrial mammals on every continent except for Antarctica. We have mammals which are very successful aquatically in the marine systems, for example. They're just a very mammals. The mammal plan is very adaptable, and it allows the mammals to radiate into all sorts of different niches, and that is what accounts for their success. So let's have a look at the different groups. The first group are fascinating, and they are the monotremes. And there are very few of them, very few types. The one type you will surely have heard of is the duckbill platypus. Truly mammalian. When we look at it, it is endothermic. It has hair, and it does produce milk, but in a particular way that I'll discuss in a minute. They have some interesting features, by the way, which are really strange. They have poison glands on their back legs, associated with a claw on the foot. A very potent toxin, which is a neurotoxin. Fortunately, they very seldom use it. It's probably used in defense, but they can be handled quite safely. These are the spiny echidnas. There are about 4 groups of 4 different species of spiny echidna, and they are found Australia and New Guinea. The duckbill platypus only found in Australia. What makes them so fascinating as a mammal group is that they lay eggs. They lay an amniotic egg, and the development of the embryo is entirely outside the body. That is a reflection of that early ancestry, of that synapsid ancestry. Here is something, proof positive, that the mammals are allied with that group, with the synapsids. This egg laying is regarded as being a very primitive feature, and these are indeed regarded as being reflective of the primitive mammalian form, which has survived, and it has survived there in that region because that Australia separated off relatively early from the rest of the continents, and this group managed to maintain itself, where the monotremes had been present all over the world, but they were superseded by the later mammalian groups. Here in Australia, New Guinea, they had just managed to hold on. This is the echidna. Here's the egg hatching here, and both the duckbill platypus and the spiny echidna do produce milk, but they do not have nipples. The milk is produced from an area of concentrated, modified sebaceous glands, and the milk just leaks onto the surface of the skin and is actually lapped by the young. It's licked off the surface of the skin by the young. The development of the nipple and of concentrated glandular structure to supply milk to the nipple is a later development. And this is a characteristic of the marsupials. Now, the marsupials we also regard as being reflective of an earlier mammalian form. Marsupials were once a dominant form worldwide, but they were superseded by another mammal group which is our own group. But the marsupials share many characteristics with the later mammals that they do not share with the monotremes. So they're quite clearly a different mammalian group, and we regard them as being reflective of a more advanced mammalian form. The first thing is they have a much higher metabolic rate than the monotremes. The second thing is they have the milk production is much more advanced. They have nipples and they have a concentrated glandular structure which produces the milk. They give birth to live young. But here's a strange thing about the marsupials, and that is that the young, when they're born, are essentially embryonic. They are very small, very, very, very undeveloped, and they climb away. They are born and climb away to an area of the body which is enclosed in a pouch, sometimes on the front, sometimes on the back, depending on the species of marsupial. And within that pouch, they complete the rest of their embryonic development. It's a very strange system, but it's clear that when they are born, what they give birth to is actually an embryo. It is not an infant. They do have a placenta in the uterus, so they have moved completely away from the egg-laying form. Instead, they have a placenta, and I'll discuss a placenta in more detail in a minute. But a placenta attaches to the wall of the uterus and is responsible for transferring nutrients and oxygen, etc., from mother's circulation to the embryo circulation. And the placenta is the boundary. The placenta is what attaches to the uterus wall to produce that interchange. It's a very complex thing, but in the marsupials, the placenta is relatively simple, and the development inside the uterus is not very long. It's a matter of weeks, and they give birth to this embryonic form, which completes the development outside. So the placenta does not have to be particularly complex. It's not going to be there for very long. So the marsupials, their distribution, their modern day distribution is very interesting because they're found in several different areas of the world. They're the best known in Australia for a particular reason. They are also found in South America and, of course, in North America. And the ones we have here are the things like the opossum, for example. So they are marsupial. The strange distribution is a result of the changing structure of the continents, but is also a reflection of events in evolutionary time amongst the mammals. So what you can think of, it's like this. Originally, these continents were all joined together. And in particular, they were joined together into a subcontinent called Gondwanaland. The marsupials were distributed all through these. After the breakup of the continents, they were separated, and all the fauna on these continents proceeded along their own evolutionary paths. In Australia, the group of mammals to which we belong, the Eutherians, were not very successful. The marsupials occupied all of the ecological niches. The Eutheria never got a foothold in Australia. And that is why today, when we look at the Australian fauna, we see it's dominated by the marsupials. Very, very, very diverse marsupial fauna in Australia. And that some of them have emigrated to New Guinea, to these islands here. In Africa, the marsupials were completely wiped out by the Eutheria. They just didn't survive at all. There are no marsupials in Africa. In South America, they managed to just hang on. Just a few marsupial groups survived and were able to persist never becoming very diverse because there were many other eutherian mammals, but one or two marsupial groups did survive as the opossums. And they were able to, in fact, to migrate to North America. They were not here originally, but they managed to migrate to North America. So that explains this strange distribution. Very, very successful here in Australia still, completely non-existent in Africa and Europe and Asia, and a few of them in South America and in North America. Sorry. These are just some of the marsupials, but this is the particularly important one. This is typical for a marsupial. This is the embryo, now pretty far advanced, but they attach. Here's the nipple. They actually attach here very, very, very firmly. They almost form a complete union of tissues there for quite a while. They're kind of so firmly bonded to the nipple. You can't separate them. You can't pull them off. The marsupials adopt many, many, many different forms. They're extremely diverse. They're flying marsupials, burrowing marsupials. There were very large predatory marsupials. They're marsupials that look like dogs. If you think about the Tasmanian devil, these sort of things, fierce carnivores, many herbivorous ones. They're particularly in Australia, extremely diverse. This is our marsupial, and keep your eyes open in New York, and you'll probably see possums somewhere. They come into my garden and eat my vegetables. But I'm always very pleased to see them, because when you look at the possums, you're greeting a line of mammals, which is many, many, many millions of years old. Okay, so that just explains what I just told you. All right, I just want to explain a little bit about the placenta. We are distinguished from the marsupials by the fact that we are truly placental. But when we look at our placenta, which is a very complex organ, we need to remember that where it is derived from. We need to remember that we are amniotes. We are amniotic. We're in that whole amniot clade. And the placenta has developed from the amniot plan. In our group, the Eutheria, the placenta is extremely complex and very long-lived. In the marsupials, it is not. It is much simpler, and it's not very long-lived. It's not needed for very long. The embryo is born at a very early stage. In the Eutheria, a tremendous amount of development takes place inside the uterus. And Eutherians give birth to young which cannot be considered embryonic. Very often, in fact, in the Eutheria, they give birth to young who are immediately mobile, immediately functional. If you think about all of the things like cows, horses, antelope, etc., 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 when they give birth, their young are able to get up and move and start interacting and behaving almost like adults almost immediately. That is completely different to the marsupials. So the Eutherians complete their embryonic development inside the uterus, and they do so because they have this extensive placenta, which is extremely efficient at extracting nutrient, exchanging gases, etc., etc. Here's the thing about that you need to know about placentas, and that is the placenta is completely separate from the mother. The placenta is part of the embryonic development, and it does it separates the mother's circulation from the fetus's circulation. They do not exchange blood at all. They do not exchange body fluids to any extent. The placenta is a boundary between mother and embryo. Let's just have a look at the amniotic egg that we saw before. This is typical of a bird's egg, for example. Here's the embryo here. Around the embryo, there is a membrane called the amnion. That's where the amniotic egg gets its name from. Then there are two other major membranes. Here is one. This one here is called the allantois there. And the allantois, in actual fact, will pretty much enclose the egg white in a bird's egg. Around the outside here is a membrane called the chorion. And the chorion is the outer membrane. So in the things like birds and reptiles, when you look at them, there's another feature, and that is that they have a yolk sac. The yolk sac is full of another batch of nutrients for the egg. So we have the amnion here, we have the chorion on the outside, and in between them is the allantois. When we come to our system of birth, we are viviparous. Our development occurs entirely within the uterus. And here's the structure. Here's the embryo. And around the embryo here is the amnion, just the same. Around the very outside is the chorion there. And it's the chorion which forms this very, very complex placenta. It has all of these tree-like structures of fingers here that extend out and interact with the mother's tissues, the uterine tissues. In between the two, here's the chorion, here's the amnion, here's the chorion. Here's the amnion, here's the chorion. And between the two, in the eutherians, here's the allantois. The allantois forms the umbilical cord. It forms part of what connects the embryo to the placenta. And this here is you can think of it like the remains of the yolk sac in a way. It's the eutherian development of the yolk sac. We don't have a yolk sac, but the membrane, this structure is still there, and it's called the vesicle, the yolk vesicle, sometimes the umbilical vesicle. So these together are forming the umbilical cord, which are joining the placenta, which is a major development of the chorion there. And on the inside, the embryo is entirely enclosed in the amnion. So this structure, the placental structure, very, very closely related to this structure. And it's a reflection of the fact that we are amniotes. The mammals are a very, very diverse group. Here, I'm not going to go through all of this, but this is going to be opportunity for you to do some extra credit. I would like, if you choose to do so, a summary of the major groups as defined here, and their major characteristics. If you want to illustrate, you're perfectly welcome to do so. And what I really would like to see is, for these groups, is one extra piece of information other than what is put in here. Just one, whatever you can derive for each of these groups, something which is not mentioned here that is characteristic of them. And that's 1.5% extra credit, okay? I don't know when to make it due. Let me think about it. I'll put up a little notice on Canvas. Okay, So I'm just about out of time. So I'll finish this off next class with a discussion about the primates. You can just read ahead because I'll do it fairly quickly. We're not going to, unfortunately, not going to spend an enormous amount of time. Are there any questions?
Yes, I wanted to know, there's a quiz on Wednesday, right? On
Oh, yes.
invertebrates?
Thank you. Yes. There's a quiz on Wednesday. Yes.
It's on invertebrates?
On vertebrates, yes.
I wanted to know if there was any way you can narrow down exactly what you wanted us to know for the quiz.
Yeah. Let me think about it, and I can do that.
Okay, thank you so much. Have a good one.
Yep, you too. Stay safe and well, everybody.
Okay, thank you, doctor.
Bye-bye.